All right. Awesome. Okay, let's get going. Good morning. Awesome to see everyone. Topic for this morning for our 15 is something very simple. What the key to listening is. Now, the truth is, obviously, we know that listening in and of itself is not very easy. Anyone in any sort of relationship or dialogue, when a person starts talking, they feel the need to have to fill that space and talk back. Just the art of listening itself is obviously something extremely important. But I want to focus on the most important part, I think, about listening, and we'll see it from one single two-letter word in a Rashi in the beginning of this week's Parsha, which I think this two-letter word is applicable to every area of life. So the Parsha is called Yisro. Yisro, ironically, it's just interesting to think about. The Parsha where the Torah is given, arguably the most important moment in all of Jewish life. The name of the chapter of the book, you would expect it to be Moshe, right? If anything, but instead it's after his father-in-law, Yisro, who's not even a Jewish guy at the time, most probably. And yet he's the one who gets the naming. That's not for now. We'll do it next year, perhaps on the Friday 15th, but just something to definitely think about how amazing that is. That's like, something amazing happening in Israel. And as opposed to calling it somebody, who was the leader in Israel, it's calling it after his father-in-law that we never heard of, who doesn't even live in Israel, has nothing to do with it. So that's crazy in of itself. But the important part that I want to mention is it starts with the beginning of at the parsha. It says Vayishma Yisro, and Yisro heard, right? And then he came and he was with Moshe and he suggested how to help set up the Jewish people. But Rashi, right at the beginning, says it's weird to say Vayishma Yisro. Yisro heard. What did he hear? Like, what was it that he heard that shook his reality? And the way Rashi says it is as follows: Ma shmua shama uba. What did Yisro hear that he heard and then came to be with the Jewish people in the desert? And it gives two answers. One is he either heard about Kriyas Yamsuf, the amazing miracle of the splitting of the sea, or he heard about Melchamas Amalek. Or Rashi says he heard about the battle that we had with Amalek, our arch enemies, who have always wanted to destroy us since the day they were put on this planet. He heard about this stuff. He was flipping or scrolling through CNN or X or whatever. He saw what took place in the news. He's like, holy cow, did you just see what happened to that sea, that split? You see what God did? And he picks up his life and he moves to Israel or to the desert with the Jewish people. Or he heard about the battle that we had with Amalek that was trying to destroy us, and we ended up beating our enemies, and he heard that and he picked up and moved. But the two-letter word that's in there, if I slow down the phrase, is Vayishma Mashmua Shama Uba. What did he hear? That he got up, Uba, and he went. Meaning, very often in life, we hear things. The greatness of Yisro wasn't that he heard things. Meaning, every single one of us read more or less the exact same news feeds. We hear the exact same stories. We live in the reality that all of us are reading about constantly. And you'll say, wow, I'm so well informed. I know so much. Did you hear this piece of news? Did you see that article? That's all great. We consume a tremendous amount of things. And therefore, it says, what did you hear today in the news? Hearing, however, is only the first part of the process. It says, what did Yisro hear that he then uba, that he got up and did something about it? See, it's great to be well informed. It's great to hear stories of what's going on, be it in Israel, in our community, things that are either miraculous or things that are have needs to be filled. And we can all hear them. But the greatness of hearing something is, what did you then what did you get up to do about it? That's the most important part of hearing things. It's not to know, it's to react to that. And Yisro was unique. Everybody was reading about the same miracles happening to the Jewish people, and they said, wow, that's really cool, and then went back to their everyday lives. Yisro stopped and said, holy cow, do you see what's happening? I have to pick up and do something about that. It's interesting. I remember hearing a story once of a guy who was in a cab with, in Israel, and he's sitting there. The guy's a religious person. He's with a cab driver. No, there's no such thing as a secular cab driver. They're all deeply religious and spiritual. But he looks like on the outside that he's a secular guy. Anyhow, he's talking to this passenger, and he says, "You should know, my friend, he became really, really like observant, very Haredi." He says, "Why? What happened?" He said, "Well, he was in the army, and something miraculous happened where literally," he said, "there's no way to explain it other than God literally saved his life." He said, like he saw the miracle right in front of his place, and that's it. Like he saw it, and he changed his whole life. So he says, "Wow, that's a crazy story." He says, "Well, what about you?" He says, no, 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 it didn't happen to me. It happened to my friend. I just heard about it, but it wasn't my story. It was his story, history, right? The idea of being in that little Misa is that when we hear things, even if things don't happen to us, but they happen around us, our job is to react to those things. Very often, actually, I just got something on a WhatsApp as a result of the podcast, the message that I was sharing about Tu B'Shvat. Somebody just sent me a message saying so and so needs a little bit of help. I was just thinking of you. And there was a thought in my mind for a second to be like, oh, that's great. You know what? I just don't have the time to deal with that. But I'm like, wait, hold on. I just heard something. Someone's in need of help. I could hear it and then just say, okay, I'll move on. Or mashmo shama uba. What do I do about it? See, I think we live in an age of tremendous information that's being shared, and we feel, wow, we're so well informed, but that doesn't describe the ethic and the value of the person. The value is when you hear it, what do you do about that reality? And this word Shema actually is possibly the most important word in the beginning of the most important sentence that every single Jew knows. It's a sentence that it's our only biblical obligation to pray is using this sentence. It's a sentence that we know that people literally went into gas chambers with. It's a sentence we say with our kids as they're getting ready for bed, and we should say ourselves as we get ready for bed. And we say it every morning when we get up. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, right? There's one God, oneness of God. He's our God. What does Shema mean? Shema doesn't just mean, yeah, I hear that. That's interesting. Yeah. It means when you hear something like that, if you really let it penetrate, hold on. As a credo of our belief, we're saying, I hear that we have a God. Well, what does that mean once I hear that? And I hear that there's a oneness in God, that everything in this world is a result of this one framework that God's created, and it's all part of the plan. So, how do I fit into the plan? It's not just, yeah, I hear it. Even in English, we often have these phrases. Someone's talking to you and they're like, they're saying their theory, and you're like, yeah, I hear it. I hear it. What does that mean? It means I hear it, but like I heard it with my ears, but it definitely didn't penetrate into my heart or my mind. I just heard the words, right? Okay, great. But that's not the importance of why God gave us ears. It's not to hear it with our ears, it's to hear it with our minds, with our hearts, and ultimately with our actions as well. And that's what we learned from Yisro. Yisro heard something and he did something about what he hears. Our challenge is every time we learn something, even this, right? We take this piece of information, this should then somehow impact the next time something comes across our path that we hear. It's not just I know the information, I really hear what you're saying. And hearing means what do you do about that which you hear? And it's interesting in the parsha it says there's in this Rashi it says there are two things that he heard. I heard this beautiful pshat, this beautiful idea from Rav Mervis, the current chief rabbi of the Commonwealth. He was in Toronto a couple of months ago, and I remember he shared it something like this. I hope I got it correct. He said it's interesting if you look at the two things that are listed that he heard that caused a reaction. One was Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea. And the other one was Milchamas Amalek, the greatest anti-Semitic nation of all times. It said there's two ways that people hear things and respond. Why does Rashi have to give both of these opinions? Presumably he heard both of them, right? The news feed one day was talking about what happened with the splitting of the sea, and the news feed a couple of weeks later was talking about this battle that we had with Amalek and our arch enemies of these anti-Semites that had no reason to hate us other than the fact that we were Jewish. He says, why does he have to bring both of these? Why do we need two opinions? Presumably he heard both of them. He said, what's the difference of opinions? The difference of opinion is which one got them moving. On a base level, sometimes people hear about anti-Semitism and it gets Jews to feel more Jewish, right? They hear what's happening in the news. They see there's an Amalek that wants to wipe us out. And then that causes a reaction amongst people who hear that saying, no, 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 not going to let them do that to us. He says that's one level. Some Jews just react to being more Jewish only when they're hated. That's their greatest motivation to go ahead and express their Judaism. He says, and then there's the idea of Yamsuf, that what motivated Yisro and what could motivate us as Jews is actually when we just see the miracles that God provides in taking care of the Jewish people generation after generation. It's not out of fear that we go ahead and move closer to Sinai. It's out of love and appreciation for the miracles of what God has done for us and continues to do for us to this very day that he read that storyline and he said, that's it, I'm picking up and moving. And I think that that idea that Rav Mervis shared is so appropriate. Please God, we get past the Milchamas Amalek time period where we feel that it's about people who want to destroy us, whether we turn on to the, TBSD or whatever, what's happening with anti-Semitism over here, right? I know some of you in Florida feels like there's no anti-Semitism down there. Whether we see what happens in Israel, still with the proxies that whatever they have left are just trying to be able to do what they can do to destroy us. That's Milchamas Amalek. And Jews sometimes say, you know what? I'm going to stand up strong because people hate us, and I'm going to invest, and I'm going to give, and I'm going to do. And that's one type of motivation. But then there's a second motivation when hopefully there's no Milchamas Amalek, there's no battle with Amalek or any of our neighbors, right? And all it is a matter of, wow, I just look around and see the miracles of life that God provides. Even we're coming off of Tu B'Shvat. A person could literally just look at the beauty of the world and creation and realize, wow, we're not living in an accidental place that a bunch of amoebas happen to go ahead and bump into each other, and somehow you, me, and this Zoom is over here. There's intelligent design behind everything that we see. And it could be that alone. And the Rambam actually beautifully says in the beginning of his Yad Chazaka, the Mishnah Torah, it's a book that deals with all of halacha, going through every area. He starts with the idea of how do you develop this relationship with Hashem. Interestingly, he says one way is by learning Torah, what we're doing. He says the other way of doing it is by looking at the creation, just sitting there and marveling at the beauty and the intricacies of creation, whether it be the birth of a child, whether it be the galaxies and the rotation, whether it be the perfect amount of balance within all of the sun and light and wind and earth to create existence on this planet when nowhere else there is. Mashmuo shama uba, what do we hear? What do we see? What do we listen to? What do we process? But processing is not the important part. It's what do you do with that? And Yisro is the hallmark of what it means to pick up a person's life and say, even though I'm totally far away from those people right now, I can't ignore what I see, and I can't not act on what I now know. And as a Jewish people during this time, we have to have that same conviction. There are things coming across our news feed every single second. There are people in need that come across that we have different things that are necessary in order to be able to help people's lives. I hear it, and once I hear it, I have to say, Uba, what am I going to get up and do as a result of that? Anyhow, Chevra, we should merit to go ahead and only hear good things, right? When we hear things that are in need, there's a beautiful idea I just shared in our shul between Mincha Marav. We're learning halachas. Right now we're doing the halachas of tzedakah. The Sefer Yashar, Rabbeinu Tam says in his book, he says, when God wants to do a friend of his a favor, when God wants to do a favor for a person, he sends him someone in need. Says, what does that mean? He means, right, if God says, you know what, I really want to make your life meaningful, what I'm going to do is not give you another vacation. I'm going to give you another purpose and value in this life, and I'll have someone knock on your door that needs you. You'd be like, oh, with favors like that, who needs people? No, the greatest thing that God could do is say, you know what, there's something I need you to do for me. And therefore we hear things, we see things always, and those are supposed to be reacted to. When we react to them, we bring ourselves to our ultimate perfection. Chevra, that's it for today. Wishing everyone an awesome Shabbos, and wherever you are for Family Day weekend, enjoy your family and the weekend, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. How do I stop this recording? Here we go. Stopping. All right. Yeah.